The Chicago Bulls winning streak came to an end last night against the Houston Rockets, and the Bulls' next 8 games is going to be a big teller of where the Chicago Bulls are going to finish in the lottery standings this year. So there are going to be a lot of Bulls fans, the pro tankers, that look at this as a chance to get back in the good graces as far as any top 10 draft pick. They're going to be some that more so look at this as a perfect test to see how the new identity of the Chicago Bulls really holds up against some of the better teams in the NBA. We're going to talk about that. Plus, we're going to look at injury updates for Lonzo Ball and Josh Giddey and dive a little bit into the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Air Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And I want to start off with this one. The Chicago Bulls' next 8 games are going to be very telling for the team, right? When you look at the Bulls yesterday with their loss, they moved back down to tie for the 8th worst record in the NBA with the Brooklyn Nets. And this was after they had gotten up to 10th and saw their lottery odds as far as for a top 4 pick cut basically in half, right? And so, for the pro tankers, they're going to be looking at this. But I want to look at this more so than just in the framework of where the Bulls draft pick is going to be, right? This is a really good test against teams of how the Bulls' recent identity, and the reason why I use the quotation marks and I hesitate to call it a true identity yet, I just have to see it for a longer period of time, but you can't deny that this is a different feeling team. This is a different level of effort, a different level of execution, and that's even without Josh Giddey the last 2 games, right? And so the Bulls' next 8 opponents, we have the Jazz, the Sun, the Sacramento Kings, the Los Angeles Lakers, 2 games against that Lakers team, Denver, Dallas, and OKC. Now, I know looking at that, people are going to look at the Jazz, the Suns, and Dallas as the easy game, right? But here's what I'll tell you. We just lost to the Phoenix Suns, 2 weeks ago? So you can't take that game for granted. The Utah Jazz are going to have a lot of bigs there if they're fully healthy. So that's going to be an interesting matchup on Monday against that Utah Jazz team. And Dallas, they can barely field an NBA team on the court. So definitely understand that. But even if they win those 3 games over the next 8, let's say they can pull out one of the other games, right? Let's say they can go 4-4 over the next 8, right? That's still, a tall test, but the Bulls are facing off against some teams that in this stretch, the Suns, like I said, a team that we lost against. The Sacramento Kings, firmly in the play-in right now. They're a talented team. While they've gone through all their own ups and downs since the trade, I still look at that and say, hey, this is still a team that can give the Bulls fits, right? We'll see what happens there. The Lakers, depends on if Luka and LeBron are playing. They've been a very different team with those players on the court, of course. Denver, come on now. Dallas, not too worried about it. And OKC Thunder are playing at a crazy level right now, and that could end up being one of those games that is just ugly. Now, the Bulls compete with that Thunder team. That would tell me a whole hell of a lot. But the Bulls have 15 games left on the season. So looking at those next 8 games, that's over half our games remaining on the year. And that's going to be a really good telling part of, again, we got some easier games to finish the year out, things like that. But I like that 8-game stretch to really tell us who this Bulls team is. And you can go off into that. And the reason why you want to use that, right, is you use all the data that you've gotten before the season, before the All-Star break, after the All-Star break. And you want to put all that together as a data point, right? And use that to decide on what you're going to do this offseason. The Bulls can have upwards of about $56 million beneath the first tax apron next year. And, of course, a lot of that's going to probably go to Josh Giddey, but that gives the Bulls a little bit of leeway of what they want to do with other things. If they can find out a place to send Vooch and Javon Carter and not take as much salary back as they're sending out, of course, you can free up a little bit more of that. So, this is a nice, the way that the Bulls are playing, right? And I get it. You want to be concerned over how much of it is going to be legit, how much of it is going to be consistent, how much of it is a mirage, right? And that's fair, right? But you can't deny what you've seen from this team, and how hard they've been playing, right? And so using all of that, I think is going to be a really good like finish point for the season, and you kind of know what you're going to have, right? Either way, you're still going to have a first round pick in this draft. Yeah, you want to make the best selection there, and yeah, we'll see where the Bulls sit. One of the special things over the stretch for the Bulls too that we're talking about identity, talking about all that, but needs to be talked a little bit more about is the Bulls defense, right? This Bulls defense, despite not having the greatest defenders, just being a more active team. Over the last 5 games, we've had the 5th best defensive rating in the game of basketball. Over the last 10 games, we've had the 11th best defensive rating in the game of basketball. And so, the Bulls, since the All-Star break, have put together a nearly top 10 defense. And that is something that you look at and you say, like, that wasn't, when you look at the personnel on the court, you wouldn't necessarily expect that. But then when you watch the games and you see how these guys are fighting, see how these guys are competing, see how these guys are not backing down, you see that, like, and that's why people say a lot of defense is effort. A lot of defense is that. Right now, scheme-wise as well, you can have a really good team defense even if your one-on-one defense isn't the best, and we've seen that, right? And, that's something that could help towards that identity as well, especially when you're looking to going into next season. So that's something that, AK and Eversley got a lot of data that they need to look at this year. But again, like I said before, the goal doesn't change. You still need to add talent to this team. This team still has to get into a place of relevancy, right? Of just having better balance. You still need to look at the fit of some of these players together. And I think a lot of that's going to be told over the next 8 games. Now, over that, you're still missing some players, things like that. But like I said before, somebody asked a very great question. It was on yesterday's post-game show in regards to, like, well, is center still as big of an issue now that we have Zach Collins and Jalen Smith? And I would say still, yeah. And the reason why I say that isn't because of to knock Jalen Smith or to knock Zach Collins, but look at how good Zach Collins looks with Coby, with Josh Giddey, with Modest Bucilis, right? And how good the team looks with him on the court. And so to me, seeing that makes me actually want a young center. Now, a lot of Zach Collins' game, I'm always going to go to that, is also that he's just a veteran. He's a smart player, right? And so IQ is always the hard thing to gauge there and how that IQ helps the team. But you can't deny his basketball IQ. So, that's the thing that a rookie necessarily, not to say that they won't have IQ, but that NBA IQ, right? How the NBA, how they adjust to the NBA game is going to be telling. But just to look at it, in Zach Collins' minutes that he's played here so far with the Chicago Bulls, 319 minutes he's played. In those minutes, we are plus 56. We have a net rating of plus 82, a defensive rating of 109.8, which is crazy. Right, that's when you're talking about the plus minus of a player or the on off of a player being that good for a team. I mean, that's just hard to deny, right? So while I love Zach Collins and I'm glad that Zach Collins is under contract another year for the Bulls, make no mistake about it, it actually makes me want a young center even more that can be a long-term mate, that can grow the game with Josh Giddey, can grow with Coby White, especially if Coby White ends up staying in. Keep in mind, this is all without having a player that can bring the defensive versatility of like an Ayo Dosunmu, right? Add that in there to that. So it's going to be, man, you got a lot that you can see from this Bulls team, man. And so this second half spurt by the Bulls, while I know for my pro tankers that want to see the Bulls lose every game and hasn't necessarily been the best run for them, before just the basketball on the court, right? Just evaluating the players on the court, it's been a really good stretch for this young team. And so love it, man. Love it. And we'll see what the Bulls do in the draft. I saw a mock the other day that has the Bulls drafting Jeremiah Fears, which is crazy because that's another guard potentially on this team. But, we'll get into the draft analysis when we got time, right? Like that we got all season to get heavy into the weeds of draft analysis. I'm going to be covering the draft. I promise you, like no other Chicago Bulls podcast is covering. We'll cover the most prospects. We're going to the most detail. We'll have tape breakdown. We'll be doing everything when it comes to these prospects. I've been doing that when the Bulls had picks in the 17s, right? And only second round picks. Now that the Bulls are going to have a lottery pick, more than likely we'll see how the play-in goes. That's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun to break down all these prospects. And one of the few times since I've been covering the Bulls in the almost 4 years we've been covering the team, one of the first time the Bulls have a first round and a second round pick going into this draft. So that's going to be another interesting thing to watch. So but yeah, really excited about that. I think these next 8 games for the Bulls, these are going to be a very important 8 games for not only the standings, but to see how the Bulls really compete. Because when you look at the Bulls, and the teams that we've beaten, we haven't necessarily beaten the best competition, right? We haven't. And that's objective, right? That's not trying to knock anybody in that case, but that's just being real. The Bulls, it's not like the Bulls are being out here being world beaters. Now, we've competed really closely with some good teams. Last night against the Houston Rockets included, and I think the defense is a really big part of why we've been able to do that. But seeing how they compete over this next stretch, that's gonna be really important. Let's finish the season strong with effort, with energy, and we'll see. Now, how much of the season are we going to finish with all of our players? That's the biggest question here, as we got injury updates for Lonzo Ball and Josh Giddey, and the one for Lonzo Ball is really concerning. Lonzo is apparently not on the court at all. He is expected to miss this entire West Coast trip. He could rejoin the team when they go back home. This one comes from Billy Donovan. I haven't heard anything about him being shut down. I think what he's doing right now is just trying to get himself back to playing. Doctors aren't saying, hey, listen, you got to sit out. It's just when he feels that he can do things on the court that he's comfortable with, like he can't shoot right now. He hasn't been able to do that. Passing and dribbling, until that subsides, he'll be out. I think he, in my conversations with him, it's been everything to try to get back to playing. No one has said to me from above, hey, this is going to be a little longer. We're going to have to shut him down. I've not heard that. And like I've said, when it comes to injuries, Billy Donovan is one of the most transparent people in this Bulls organization that you're going to hear from when it comes down to injuries. So here's the thing. The Lonzo Ball thing is concerning, and it's concerning for a couple of different reasons, right? We initially went down with a wrist injury. It was almost as if it wasn't that big of a deal, right? Almost. And then it slowly turned into like this thing now where he's been out for a long freaking time. Like, Lonzo's been out for quite a bit. And so, hearing that he's not officially shut down for the season, it's great to hear. But, like, Lonzo hasn't played since February 28th. That was the last game that Lonzo Ball played in. And in that game, he actually performed pretty well. 14 points, 5 of 13 shooting from the field, 2 assists, 1 steal in that game, right? But for Lonzo to be out of basketball, and if they're saying that he's not going to make this West Coast trip at all, that means that that's another month, basically, of Lonzo Ball missing. Keep in mind, he missed 13 games in a row earlier in the season. So it's just a question about what is going on with Lonzo. And the Bulls locked him into a contract extension. Cool, I understood it at the time for what it's worth. But, like, our West Coast trip ends, and we go back home March 27th. That'll be basically exactly a month since the last time that Lonzo Ball took the basketball court, if he's not going to make this entire West Coast trip. And so you've locked him in, even though the contract isn't bad, it's $10 million. That's not bad at all. But when you have a player like Trey Jones playing the way that he has been, of course, in hindsight, it's going to look again like another mismanagement, miscalculation by this Bulls front office. And that, especially when we heard that they were offered a first-round pick for Lonzo, possibly, right? It brings about just more questions on the evaluation there. So, listen, it sucks that Lonzo's out. I hope that Lonzo can get back on the court. Hope that he can finish the season strong. But overall, like, Lonzo, this is why Lonzo Ball cannot be a factor. When people say things like, oh, well, they re-signed Lonzo Ball, what does that mean for Josh Giddey? Nothing. Because you cannot bet on Lonzo Ball to be on the court for you. You just can't do that. And for a 22-year-old point guard, for anybody who thinks that you're going to injury-plagued 27-year-old point guard that, yes, is talented when he's on the basketball court, but for a 22-year-old point guard that, yeah, he has his own injury concerns and things like that, like, you're going to forego that because of an injured player? Like, Lonzo, while it's been a revelation, right, to see Lonzo on the court. He's played 35 games. Lonzo Ball, in his 4 years under contract with the Chicago Bulls, has played a total of 70 games. 35 his first year, 35 so far this year, right? And even if he is out the remainder of this West Coast trip, there's zero chance for him to play 12 games, meaning that we won't even get a full season worth of basketball out of Lonzo Ball over his initial 4-year contract. So, no, like, it sucks, and I feel for Lonzo, and he's making history every time he gets back on the court. But, like, this isn't even the knee. This is a wrist. And this is why when people say things like, oh, well, Lonzo has a whole new knee, that shouldn't be an issue anymore. Let's not forget that with Lonzo, it's been a multitude of injuries. It's always been something, and he always takes longer to come back from things than most people. That's where the concern lies with Lonzo. So we'll see what the future holds, but we also got an update on Josh Giddey. He is out, but we did hear this, that Josh Giddey he's, of course, out of the walking boot. He was able to sprint up and down the court. So Billy Donovan actually is not ruling him out for the game against Utah on Monday. So it seems like that could still be kind of in doubt, right? But the Bulls do have a back-to-back against Phoenix and Sacramento on Wednesday and Thursday. So maybe one of those games he makes his return, sits the other one. But it seems like Giddey's probably on path to make a return back to basketball next week for the Chicago Bulls, which is really, really good. You want to see Giddey continue his streak. You want to see him continue to finish the season strong, him and Coby to continue working on their chemistry. And as long as those things happen, it's going to be a strong finish for Josh Giddey. So, 2 point guards still injured. Lonzo, more bleak of an outlook. Josh Giddey, more of a positive one. Seems like we are in a pretty safe zone to see Josh Giddey back in a Bulls uniform next week. So I think that's good to see as well for that Bulls team, especially, as we said, over these next 8 games, really in a tough evaluation period with tough competition. So we'll see what the Bulls have at that point in time. But all right, let's get into the mailbag portion. Only 2 voicemails today for the mailbag. Let's get into this first one. This one's from Reggie.
Hey, this is Reginald, and just calling out for the Bulls' 4th win against the Brooklyn Nets. And I gotta say, I know that a lot of people are arguing that the Bulls have too many guards, or that the Bulls, need to do whatever when it comes to Josh Giddey. Maybe keep him, maybe let him walk. But for me, I would love to see the Bulls bring back both Giddey and Trey Jones. And a lot of people might say, well, what are you going to do with Trey Jones as your 3rd point guard or 4th point guard? But my thing is, you don't let players who you know can help you win walk for nothing. This is just like what the Bulls did with Drummond, or what they did with really DeMar too, where they found a guy who had value, but instead of bringing him back, they either let him walk for nothing or got so little value back. You just like, there were better things you could have done. And now we're looking at Trey Jones like, well, we already signed Lonzo Ball to a 2-year deal. Why bring Trey Jones back? But Lonzo Ball's hurt right now. And throughout his entire career, he's been hurt. There's always a knee or wrist or some other injury that takes him out for a considerable amount of time. So if Giddey's going to be your starting point guard, you have to have a reliable backup who can give you at least 50 games healthy. And I think that's Trey Jones. Now, maybe the Bulls keep Trey. Maybe they keep Lonzo Ball. Maybe they keep Giddey. But having too much talent is not a bad thing. Having too much depth is not a bad thing. Like I said before, you're going to have to buy out Javon Carter or put him in a deal with Vooch, package them together and get that like $26 million player in return. But either way, this should be Javon Carter's last season as a Bull because he has no value in truth. But yeah, go ahead, sign Trey Jones to like a 4-year, $40 million deal. Go ahead and give Giddey a 4-year, $120 or $112 million deal. I'm fine with that. Thanks for listening.
Re-sign Giddey and Trey Jones. Like I've said it before, I've said it many times. No knock on Trey at all, but it's business, right? Now, your comparison to even Drummond, DeMar, the difference is that we didn't get anything for those guys knowing they were becoming free agents, and we actually had them at the trade deadline. We had them for years leading up before we let them walk for nothing. Trey Jones was an acquisition at the deadline that I don't think the Bulls necessarily expected to play this way for this team. But I don't think that, we'll see. It's going to be difficult, right? I know it's easy to say, well, let's just buy out Javon Carter. You don't typically do that. You don't see the Bulls buy out players because it still counts against your cap. Now, the Bulls do have, like I said, roughly around $56 million beneath the first tax apron next year. But that's before options are picked up. That's bird rights, things like that. So we'll see what happens there. But I still say this: there's still a slim chance, as things stand right now, that Trey Jones is back in the Bulls uniform. Because again, we got 2 picks coming in here, and 3 open roster spots, 1 that's going to re-sign Josh Giddey. So that opens that thing up. Now, if you can move some of those guaranteed contracts, like if you can move Vooch and Javon Carter, get 1 player back, great. That does wonders for you, right? But I just don't, the Bulls typically don't buy out players because keep in mind, if you buy them out at the start of the season, it's not like you get a full kind of, and Javon Carter has no reason to give full a lot of money back on that buyout because his market as a free agent is not going to be great because guess what? He sucks, right? And he hasn't played good under a Bulls uniform. So that's what you're looking at. But, we'll see what the future does hold. I love Trey. Again, this is no knock to Trey Jones as a player. I hope that he can find a way to stay in a Bulls uniform because as you said, as we just talked about before the mailbag portion, Lonzo's hurt. Lonzo's probably you always have to have a safety for Lonzo, right? So we'll see here. But we got a lot of guards and, we'll see what the future does hold. All right, let's get into the next voicemail, man. This one's from Shay.
What's up, Hayes? Look, man, I know this may sound crazy to you, but I'm not necessarily giving up on Patrick Williams just yet and him being a starter or a productive starter. Now, look, I know y'all gonna say, oh, he in his 4th season or 5th season or whatever the hell, but let's think about it for a second, man. Granted, he's passive, he needs to be more aggressive, but when you look at when you see people like Zach Collins, and you see people like, I throw John Collins in there too, and all they need is to go to another team. Now, I'm not saying Patrick Williams needs to do that, but I mean, maybe a lot of people, maybe he's just a late bloomer for right now, because remember, we did have a player by the name of James Johnson who we drafted who showed a little bit of signs of athleticism and all that, blah, 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 blah. But he did show some signs. It took him too, going to another team. But as I'm saying, that Patrick Williams might have to do that, or maybe he might. But there is a good chance we could unlock something where he is a productive NBA player. Now, I know what people are going to say. Oh, Shay, you're crazy. The jury's still out. Patrick Williams ain't nothing, blah, 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 blah. But, hey, man, you never know because a lot of people, maybe they might need new scenery. Maybe they might need a season where they could just wake up, or maybe they might need a season that's fully healthy. But you never, ever really know, man. Honestly, there is something that we can unlock Patrick Williams. Now, whether he becomes a starter or bench player, I don't know, but he can still be a productive player in this league. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, tell me what you think. Peace.
Shay, every time you get to using comparisons, you use terrible comparisons. You use John Collins. You mean the player that even in his rookie year had a more statistical productive season than any of Patrick Williams' seasons? Like you do realize that with Atlanta, he had several seasons of averaging double-digit figures, 2 of averaging 20, close to 20 points per. Like, what are you talking about, Shay? What are you talking about? And his stats have actually been worse since going to Utah. Now, Zach Collins, you mentioned Zach Collins, cool. I guess you can look at Zach Collins for sure, right? But the thing is, I don't think anybody, and you kind of contradicted yourself in that voicemail too. You're like, I'm not ready to give up on him as a starter. But then at the end of the voicemail, I'm not necessarily saying him as a starter. What are you saying then, Shay? Y'all, Shay's my little brother, so I give Shay a lot of crap. But here's the thing I'll say to this. You use James Johnson too. There's nothing special about James Johnson's career. P. Will right now, I'm not giving up on him as a productive bench player. I think that what he's shown the last couple of games, and even if you look at the games that he played right before he went down with injury, he can be a productive bench player. And that's at this point, that's what I'm expecting from P. Will. Be productive, coming off the bench for this Bulls team. Worry about the rest later, right? And P. Will has never been this player that people try to act like, oh, he shouldn't at all be in the NBA. No, P. Will's shown that he can be an NBA player. It's just the expectations that you have around that, right? So we'll see what the future holds for P. Will. I don't think the Bulls are going to send him off anytime soon. I know some people are hoping for that. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be in a Bulls uniform next year, and we'll see what the future holds for P. Will. But, guys, thank you so much for leaving those voicemails. Make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.